The police once showed up at my door because a neighbor accused me of indecent exposure in my own backyard in broad daylight, wearing nothing more than a conservative two-piece swimsuit. Imagine standing in front of two uniformed officers being told you might face charges for corrupting children, even though there weren't any children anywhere near my property. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about petty complaints, this was war, and my own home had turned into the battlefield. My name is Margaret Chin, and I thought moving into a quiet suburb in Fairfax, Virginia would finally give me some peace. I'd worked myself half to death in hospitals for years, chasing stability, dreaming of a place where I could rest on my days off. Instead, I landed in a neighborhood where peace was just an illusion, carefully policed by one man, Richard Hawthorne, the self-appointed king of the HOA. If there was a blade of grass too long, Richard noticed. If someone painted their shutters the wrong shade of beige, Richard sent a warning letter. And if a woman dared to relax in her own backyard, well, apparently that was grounds for public shaming. The first confrontation came out of nowhere. It was a hot Saturday afternoon, and I was stretched out by my pool, finally enjoying the water I'd been paying to maintain. Richard appeared at the edge of my property, stiff as a soldier on patrol, and asked if I'd ever considered putting up privacy screening. His voice had that oily politeness people use when they think they're superior. "This is a family neighborhood," he said, letting the words drip with implication. I sat up dripping wet and told him flatly, "I'm on my property wearing more fabric than most summer dresses. If that offends you, that's your problem." He turned red, sputtered something about decency, and stormed off. I should have left it there. But an hour later, the cops arrived. They were kind, even embarrassed, but the report was filed a complaint about indecent exposure. No photos, no witnesses, no children actually present. Just Richard's word against mine. The officers admitted there was no violation, but the damage was done. I stood on my porch, shaking with rage and humiliation, knowing every curtain on the street had probably been twitching while the squad car idled in my driveway. I tried to reason with the HOA board. I went to a meeting, spoke calmly, explained what had happened. The board members glanced at each other, murmured something about keeping harmony in the neighborhood, and suggested I avoid behavior that might invite misunderstandings. They weren't on my side. No one was. Richard had turned the narrative upside down. I wasn't the victim anymore, I was the problem. Weeks passed, and the harassment escalated. Anonymous notes appeared in my mailbox, warning me to cover up. A letter from the HOA claimed I needed to install fencing tall enough to hide the pool area for community standards. Richard even started loitering near my property line, pretending to check his hedges while blatantly recording me on his phone. I'd never felt so exposed, so vulnerable. At night, lying in bed, I'd stare at the ceiling and question myself. Was I being stubborn? Was it worth it? Maybe I should just sell the house and get out before things got uglier. The thought of packing up and leaving gnawed at me, and one night I nearly broke down completely. The idea of fighting a man who had the entire HOA wrapped around his finger felt impossible. For a few days I actually considered giving in. But then a neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, pulled me aside at the grocery store. She whispered that Richard was bragging about how he'd force me out if I didn't learn my place. He'd already diverted HOA funds to consult a lawyer planning to sue me for violations that didn't even exist. That was the turning point. I wasn't crazy, and I wasn't wrong. Richard was abusing his power, and if I didn't push back, he'd just do it to someone else next. So I hired my own attorney. We started digging. And sure enough, Richard's entire case was built on nothing fabricated complaints, no evidence, vague language in HOA bylaws twisted into nonsense. What he didn't know was that I also had a weapon of my own, my security cameras. I pulled up the footage, and there he was, clear as day, leaning over my fence, pointing his phone into my yard, recording me without my consent. If anyone was indecent here, it was him. I kept quiet, waiting for the perfect moment. That moment came at the next HOA meeting. The community hall was packed, neighbors murmuring as Richard strutted to the front like he was about to deliver a sermon. He listed my supposed sins: indecency, disruption behavior not in line with community standards. He actually tried to make me sound like a criminal. When he finished, I stood up slowly, my hands shaking but my voice steady. I thanked him for laying out his case so clearly. Then I reached into my bag, pulled out a laptop, and connected it to the projector. The room went silent as the footage rolled. There was Richard standing at my fence phone in hand, zooming in on me in my yard. Clip after clip played, each one worse than the last. The gasp that swept through the room was almost satisfying enough to erase months of misery. Someone muttered, "That's illegal." Another whispered, "Is he filming her?" Richard stammered his face, beet red, trying to claim it was taken out of context. But the more he spoke, the deeper he buried himself. For once, the HOA board didn't look at me like I was the problem. They looked at him like he was a liability. I'll never forget the moment Sergeant Rodriguez from the Fairfax Police stepped forward this time, not to question me, but to escort Richard out. The same man who had tried to paint me as indecent was suddenly the one under investigation for harassment, possibly even voyeurism. The power he had clung to for years evaporated in a single evening. He resigned as HOA president before the week was out. I didn't cheer. I didn't celebrate. I just sat there watching him leave my neighbors, whispering furiously among themselves. After months of being humiliated, doubting myself, nearly giving up, I finally had justice. And here's the truth. I learned sometimes the loudest voice in the room isn't the one that's right. It's just the one that's gotten away with bullying the longest. But bullies always slip up, and when they do, you'd better be ready to hit play.